excuse me, local, healthy, and fresh, crafting a successful farm to school produce bid. My name is Beth Feehan, and I'm the director of the New Jersey Farm to School Network. We are thrilled to have the Mid-Atlantic region joining us for this webinar, the Farm to School Network for the Mid-Atlantic region, and our representative, Deb Bensel, who's our regional lead from the Food Trust. She's been really important to help us get the information going for this and to organize it with Chelsea Simpson from the National Farm to School Network. On today's agenda, we will start out by introducing our presenters and go over two different parts of local procurement that Andrea Early from Virginia and Dan Witkowski from New Jersey have participated in the school districts that they're in. And then we'll finish up with probably about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes of question and answer at the end. If you look at the section on the right where there's an opportunity to type your questions at the bottom, even while the webinar is going on, if you want to type your questions in, we'll keep track of those. So I'd like to introduce Deb Bensel. She is the National Farm to School Regional Lead Coordinator for the Mid-Atlantic region and Program Manager at the Food Trust. And Deb will be the moderator for today, so I'm going to let her take over.
Thanks, Beth. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. We are really excited to have the opportunity to talk with you today, as Beth said, about procurement and writing a successful local produce bid. But as you'll hear, we're also going to talk about some more informal ways to bring healthy, fresh, locally grown fruits and vegetables into your school cafeterias. So on that note, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Andrea Early. She is the Director for School Nutrition at Harrisonburg City Schools in Harrisonburg, Virginia. Andrea is also the Virginia State Lead for the National Farm to School Network and is a procurement whiz. She's going to tell you mostly about her work with produce, but you should know, if any of you are interested, that Andrea has also successfully put out bids for local pastured beef as well, which is pretty innovative for our region. So I'd like to turn this over to Andrea for patchwork produce procurement, and there we go.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm excited to join you from Virginia, and just a brief overview of my presentation this afternoon, just to give you a little bit of a history on our Farm to School program here in Harrisonburg. We are a relatively small school division. We have about 5,500 students. We have 8 schools. They're located within miles of each other, so we are sort of a small city in the western part of Virginia. We've been doing our farm to school procurement for the last 7 years, and so I really can't emphasize enough to all of you as you start to either think about getting a farm to school program started or you're thinking about expanding one, that really baby step process is the key. And I know Dan is going to talk about this more as a part of his presentation, but think small. We started with a couple totes of lettuce from a local farmer 7 years ago, and at this point we purchase about 10% of our food budget locally, which we define as being either grown or produced within the state of Virginia. And of course, everybody defines local a little bit different. So don't feel like you have to start huge. We all know that food procurement is just one aspect of what we handle every day. Always a new regulation, always lots of things not even related to food that we deal with. So you don't have to start huge. Start small. That's a big take-home message from me. All right, so I'm going to talk about some specific strategies that we've used as we've procured local foods, and we've called it patchwork procurement because we really go about it in a number of different ways. So I'm going to speak to using an RFP with geographic preference language, purchasing from a local aggregator, direct purchases from individual farmers using informal procurement methods, and then direct purchases from individual farmers using more of a formal procurement method. All right. All right, so let's start with what I guess is the low-hanging fruit, pardon the pun that I use all the time, and usually I say it in front of a group, and I hope you're laughing, maybe on your end of the computer, but anyway, I'll pretend you are. So this is using a produce RFP with geographic preference language. And so the term RFP is a request for proposal. It's a little different than using a bid. And so typically competitive bidding is looking at price only for the most part, where RFPs are used for things like produce, where the pricing can be variable through the year, and it allows you to look at factors other than price being one factor in evaluating the contract, but it's not the only one. You can look at terms of service and things like that. So we do use an RFP to procure the large majority of produce that we serve. And what we do within that RFP is we include geographic preference language, as well as language that would allow us to purchase off contract. And so let me show you some examples of that language from our bid. And I mentioned that I'm breaking all the rules of PowerPoint with this slide because it's really busy, but I thought if you would like to steal this language later, you certainly can, and I think these slides are going to be available to all of you. So within the general terms and conditions on this RFP, and again, this is to have a contract with one vendor to supply fresh fruits and vegetables, as we're describing in, we say, Appendix A, which is a list of all the produce that we're going to use during a year. This means we want one large-scale produce distributor. We don't want one produce distributor to have a couple schools, another to have a portion of our schools. We want one who's going to come around 2 times a week and deliver produce to us all year long, because we realize that while we want to use Virginia grown as much as possible, we also want to serve kids fresh fruits and vegetables year round. And so that's the idea. Now, we do include in this bid language, if you'll see here, Appendix A, please note that HCPS reserves the right to buy Virginia-grown fresh produce direct from farmers, food hubs, auctions, and other small-scale aggregators when product is available in support of the division's farm-to-school efforts. And so it's just a caveat that, if you're going to bid on this contract, then you have to understand that we do reserve the right to go off contract occasionally and buy direct. We have not had an issue with produce distributors bidding on us. They realize that they're going to get a large amount of our business. We're serving more and more fruits and vegetables, you all know, as a result of meal pattern change and increased portion sizes. So they're certainly going to do a large amount of business, and I think it also pushes them in the direction of trying to bring in those Virginia-grown products, because we're certainly going to be willing to buy them through the distributor if they're available. And so then the next bullet point just shows language that we include in the section of the RFP where we have the evaluative criteria. So this is a 100-point value RFP, and so 20 of those points, so it's a pretty high amount of the points, go towards looking at how many Virginia farms this particular distributor works with. And so you can see here that we sort of spell out that we are an active participant in the Farm to School program. The firm should make Virginia-grown produce available to schools when available. They need to indicate on their price list and on their invoices. It's not included here, but we do have them list that on the invoice. And then we ask them to submit a list of Virginia farms with the proposal. And so you can see how we award point value in our RFP. And so that's something, as you write RFPs, you need to be able to quantify how you're awarding points. And so when we started developing our RFP, we weren't great. It was definitely a working document. And so through the years, we've really done more to quantify how we're awarding point value. And so you can see just on these 20 points, if their list would have no Virginia farms, you would have no points, up to 20 points if they work with 16 or more Virginia farms. So that's how we've been able to use our regular produce distributor to include that geographic preference language. The other thing is just continual phone calls with the distributor to encourage them to purchase locally. And we're at a point with our current distributor where he calls me a lot of the time. Like in the fall, he may call me and say, there's a small Asian pear orchard that I can get some good pricing for Asian pears this week. Do you want to swap out the apples that you ordered because the price is going to be pretty good where you can afford it. And so we have just a lot of weekly phone conversations about what's available. And so they've definitely been a partner. So again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can work within your existing systems, and it's probably the easiest starting point. All right. Next, we do buy direct from a local aggregator, and this is kind of unique to our area. We buy from a produce auction, which is about 20 minutes from Harrisonburg. And so I think these auctions are popping up around the country, so you may hear about some in your area. I'm not sure if there are auctions in New Jersey or not, but this is something that is allowed under Virginia procurement law, purchasing from a public auction. You don't need to follow the typical procurement law. You can buy off contract from public auctions. And so these are a couple pictures from this auction that is in our backyard, and they aggregate from about 400 small Virginia farmers, many of them who grow on just a few acres of land. And it's really great. It allows a large enough volume for us, and you can see on the picture to the right that they're very good about tagging product. You can see those green stickers indicate the farm, when it was harvested, and so they have a very good traceability system. We get one delivery to our high school, and then we do move it around from there. So we're lucky to have a maintenance staff who helps us some with our local food distribution, which is always an issue. You know, when we talk about farm to school, how do you purchase the food and then how do you get it around to your school? So if we can use our distributor, that helps. And we also use our maintenance staff to take around some of our foods, which is great. All right. Okay, next is direct from farmers and producers. So again, this is allowed under small purchase threshold. So that varies by state and locality. I believe that the federal small purchase threshold is $100,000 of product from one vendor in a year. In Virginia, it's actually $50,000, and that's what it's set at our school division. So if I'm spending less than $50,000 from a particular producer or farmer, I don't need a formal bid or a formal RFP, but we do need to solicit pricing from 3 firms if it's available. And so I'll give you an example here. The lettuce that you see, we have a farmer in our area who grows lettuce year-round in greenhouses for our school division and then for a larger division in Northern Virginia. We're his 2 main customers. He does some farmers markets in the summer, but his primary source of income is Harrisonburg City Schools and Prince William County Schools in Northern Virginia. So he's a real farm-to-school success story. He is willing to deliver to all of our schools once a week. Again, we're under that $50,000 level, so we don't need a formal bid, but I always need to be looking for other farmers who could possibly provide the same product and delivery schedule. At this point, he's the only game in town, but again, we're always looking and trying to be fair with and open with what we need, and so that there is competition even within this small market. So that is direct from the farmer and producer. Again, because of the small purchase threshold and being under that, we wouldn't need to do a formal bid. And again, in our regular RFP language, we do let that prime vendor know that we intend to buy direct from farmers and producers when it's advantageous. And so this would be an example of where that comes into play for us. Okay, and finally, again, here's a busy slide, and I apologize for that. We buy direct from a farmer with formal bid language, and this is an example of hamburger patties and ground beef. We have one bid for ground beef, and that this year we had to do a formal bid because we exceeded that $50,000 level, small purchase level last school year. We purchased, I think, $51,000, so we were just over, and we said, all right, we need to do a formal bid with geographic preference language. And so again, for this product, if you look at the first bullet point, you know, we have a prime vendor for things other than produce. So our prime vendor who does all of our refrigerated, frozen, paper supplies, and essentially everything that's not produce, milk, or bread. Okay, and I'm sure that's similar to what you all are doing as well. And so again, within that bid, that's a bid, not an RFP, we do have the language here in the first bullet point that it is the intent of the BRG, which is our food buying co-op, to award all line item products to one prime vendor. However, in support of farm to school, we reserve to buy off contract, yada, yada. Of course, this has not been an issue in terms of people not wanting to bid because it's a very small portion of money that I think gets diverted from the distributor, but we do include it in there. And then the second bullet point is the language that we've included in our bid for it's ground beef and hamburger patties. And so we'll just kind of read through this to show you how we use geographic preference in our determination in our contract award. And so we define, the ground beef must come from cattle specifically raised for beef production, yada, yada, and we go through all of that. We do include in the bid how we'd like the cases packed and marked, and I don't think I clipped that and pasted it in here. But we do, in that last sentence, we prefer that cattle be raised and processed within 100 miles of Harrisonburg, Virginia, and that 50 cents per pound will be deducted from quoted price per pound for purposes of comparison between firms if this preference is met. And so again, we wouldn't pay that farmer 50 cents less per pound. We're just deducting that from the price that they quoted for comparison purposes. And so that would allow a geographic preference. It's not a requirement. What was really exciting about this bid is that we actually had 3 firms within 100 miles of Harrisonburg who were able to bid on this contract, and we were able to get a pretty good price. It is higher than what we would pay through a distributor, but still a good price and something we felt we could afford, and we were excited that there was that much competition within the small market. And so, yes, I believe that's all I have, and I think we are going to take questions at the end, I understand. Is that correct, Deb?
That's right, yep.
Okay.
Yep, that's right. So,
okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much, Andrea. That was really helpful. I hope that everyone gleaned a little bit out of her presentation. And I wanted to mention that, yes, we'll wait and we'll just do question and answers at the end. I want to encourage everyone who's here to go ahead and type in answers now. We'll be able to just see what's out there and pick and choose what we'll have time to answer at the end. So go ahead and type that into your chat box if you have a question, and ask about anything at all regarding procurement and purchasing, and after you see Dan's presentations, you may have some questions about some of the work that he's done as well. I also wanted to just address as well that this webinar is being recorded, and the slides and the audio and all of that good stuff, the transcript, will be available afterwards to you. So if you don't want to take, really quick notes or anything like that, don't fear. This will all be available. So at this time, I'd just love to introduce Dan Mikowski. Dan is a regional food service director for NutriServe, which is a food service management company based out of central and southern New Jersey. He oversees a number of districts, and NutriServe got really excited and interested and involved in farm to school and local food purchasing a few years ago, and they've really embraced working with New Jersey growers and have done a great job incorporating these fresh, healthy, really delicious fruits and vegetables into their cafeterias. So Dan is going to talk a little bit about the way that they got started and where they are now, and some of the successes that they've had along the way. So Dan?
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. As Andrea said earlier, I'm going to go over a little bit more informally on how we got to use Farm to School. So to start off, the questions to consider if you're looking at something like this. First thing is, can you use the produce grown locally in your region? If you don't know it's locally grown in your region, a lot of your food service workers might have gardens and they know what grow there. You know what comes in. So that's one of the aspects that you have to start off, like what produce is grown around your area. For instance, and you also need to know what your growing windows are. For instance, in the state of New Jersey, our growing windows is sort of small. It goes from approximately March through the end of September, beginning of October. So we don't have a year-round growing window. And next, you want to look at how could this benefit my school district. Most school districts always want some positive press to come out in their school district, and they want to be better than the school district next to them. So it's always going to benefit your school district. And will it give more community value? As you'll see later in my presentation, it will get community value. You might be in an area where the farmer's daughter and son go to the school that you're actually working in. So that community value is a major thing to look at. And what are my resources to get the food to the school district? A lot of times you might have your normal delivery companies that are going to deliver your food, but the other thing that you want to look at is maybe you have a delivery driver on staff. You might have a van that goes and picks up mail at another school, and if that's the case, you might not be able to get your food to one school, but it might go to another school and somebody might be able to pick that up. So, and as Andrea said, she really put that in there. And right down on the bottom of this slide, start small. To get anything in the school, it's going to benefit your school district. It's going to give you the more community value. So if you can get one item a month onto a menu, that's still supporting your district and your community. And for the next, when we started looking at procuring local produce with vendors, we looked at our existing vendors and made calls to them and to see who would be able to help us get some of the produce to our schools. Now, like I said, if you want to start small, they might only have 2 items right now. And as they see the interest in school districts coming forth with local produce, they might start off and say, I have 2 items right now in this month or 2 months that we're actually going to go ahead and procure, and we're going to be making these available to you. As you do that, they might start looking more and more for some items that are locally for you. So then we also looked to our food service directors and also employees that knew of any companies or farms that would supply local produce. And in one instance, one of the employees said, yes, you know, my father is a farmer. And so that's how we got the produce in that school district. And then actually anytime you can do a Google search because you can find anything on the internet. I just went ahead the other day just to try it out again. I did a Google search for this area around Philadelphia where we're located, and there were so many different other vendors that we don't deal with, but we're able to get local produce to a school district, to a house, to get it to be picked up, such as a co-op or a CSA. So that's something else that possibly could get your produce there. And then what we did was, you don't have to make this as formal as Andrea spoke earlier about, like a formal RFP bid process. Just an informal meeting to your vendors and have an existing vendor come in, and you just set up a meeting and talk over the plan and ask how can we get the produce to our door. And a lot of times we had a couple different people involved in that. It would be a co-op possibly, and then a vendor, and then the co-op said to the vendor, you know, I can send you as the vendor the food, then we can get it to your door. So it took a couple hands to get some produce to our door in some instances. So by having an informal meeting, even though you don't do all the work, it's easier for everybody to come together and work as a team to get this little job done, which can eventually grow into a bigger job to get local produce into the schools. And then during an informal meeting, we asked what products they have that are local, and in some cases they only started and said we only have 2 items that are local, and then they grew from there at being the vendor that wanted to give us the local produce. And then you have to also have your delivery days to be flexible. If a farmer's not going to be able to harvest this, he harvests every Monday, so it won't get to your vendor till Tuesday, and your vendor won't be able to deliver till Wednesday, then you have to be flexible to change your delivery days if you want to get extra local produce to your door. And then sometimes it's easier to try to use more than one vendor if possible. We've done that in the past. The other thing I want to point out, there's a little picture over there on the right-hand side. And when we talked to some farms also and saw what they can produce for us and if they were able to get it to us, they actually said, why don't you come down and see what we grow, and they'll take you on a farm tour, which was really a neat thing for us to do, and also some of the food service workers that were going and the food service directors. So that really was a neat kind of thing to see where your produce is actually coming. And now think supplementation, not replacement. We researched how local items could fit into your current menus. Changing them is not necessary. I do not advise that at all. If you look at your menu and look over, and then what are you using that is already available locally, then you can possibly talk to your vendor in that informal session and say, well, look, this is what I have on my menu. And it's also good to bring your menus with you during that informal meeting, and you can ask them, hey, this is what I have on here. These are the vegetables we're serving. Or in Andrea's case, she's actually using a beef, which is great. And so don't change your menus is one of the key points that I want to make, but have the vendor work around your menu to see what you can get availability for. Then we started working with a vendor that's actually out of Philadelphia called Common Market. They actually bring in all local produce from approximately 50 miles from around this area. And when we started using them, that was a supplemental vendor that we used. And that supplemental vendor of this Common Market, they would deliver to us besides a produce company also. And that was really good. We could get some schools delivered probably usually it was once a week or once every 2 weeks for that. And then we use another company, which is just a regular local produce, Ambrosi Produce. We were able to supplement it to some of the districts that bought most of their produce from the larger distributors like a Cisco, a U.S. Food Service, AFI, some of those. But what Ambrosi Produce did, which Andrea touched base on a little bit, was Ambrosi Produce would let us know weekly what they had available that was locally. And that would be an email to the districts that are using them. And it was really a good way to see what you could put on your menu. If you needed to actually change your menu, that was fine. But the flexibility part of it was really the way to go. And then how our suppliers helped to get the New Jersey produce to the school. I was just talking about the email, the list of local produce, and that was great. Some of our food service directors that we had were really liking this. They didn't have to figure out what was in the growing period of that month. They would just find out what's available. And then some of our local farmers, because we are the Garden State, obviously, and some of the schools are located in the middle of farmland. And you could drive around, there's farms around it, and then there's the school right in the middle of farmland. So that was another way to get this. And then, like we said, partnering with a local company that deals in local produce, pairing with Common Market Ambrosi, they were really good in doing this. And how getting New Jersey produce into our schools really benefited school gardens. When we started bringing local produce in, the school gardens, and they really saw the need for local produce, and some of the students never even saw some of the vegetables we were bringing in. So then what we did was we partnered with the school to get a school garden in. When they started growing their gardens, they would grow, even if they grew 2 plants of, say, a zucchini, then they would harvest the zucchini, and when they harvested the zucchini, we would call our vendor and say, do you have any local zucchini? They would say, yes, it's from, 10 miles away from the school, so it's still local. So we were able to supplement what they grew in the garden and still bring local produce into that school. And we would have tastings for that. Different recipes would go out to the parents in the school. And then positive press. School gardens is a big way to get positive press into the school, and along with using local produce on the menu. And then district support. In one instance, we had a teacher ordered a meal, and it stated on that menu that the salad came from a farm. That teacher came down and said, "Oh my God, I can't believe it. That's my father-in-law's farm." The teacher to this day is one of the unbelievable cheerleaders for Farm to School in that district. And before we even find out what's being grown, that teacher comes in and lets us know. So they're your stakeholders. So you might not even know that a farmer's daughter or son is going to your school, or a teacher might have a husband that is a farmer. You don't know that until you actually put this information out. So those are good things to try to get out to get positive press. And how do we get the stakeholders to buy in? Tastings that we had for some of the local produce was really a way to do it. We asked support from some of the parent-teacher organizations and associations, and that was really good to get the parents involved. Then they know that we're using local produce. They bring it back to their meetings. They also bring it back to the corner of the school when they're dropping their children off. You know, the parents always talk. You know, it might be at Girl Scouts, it might be at a soccer game, and they're always talking about that. So that's really good. And then another stakeholder is the teachers, like I mentioned, that one teacher is their father-in-law had a farm already. And this other math teacher asked, how can we give out different amounts of the fresh vegetables that were cupped up? We used local vegetables that day, cupped them up, and then asked her students to add up to 2 amounts in each cup. She asked to actually do different. I know we have our regulations that we need, you know, our half cup and everything of vegetables, but she asked, can we put five celery sticks in one? Can we put 4 in another? So everybody had to add up a different amount. So the math teacher is always coming down in that school and doing the same thing. Some of the science teachers also are using local produce in their biology lessons. If we find, you know, I know in New Jersey, in my garden per se, we always have cutworms come through and chewing up our tomato plants in my garden. So what they'll do is they'll go down in a school garden if they have something growing, and they'll say, this is how we can put something else next to it, and they use it in a biology lesson. But then we're growing great tomatoes, and then the local tomatoes eventually will come in, and like I said before, they'll go ahead and supplement that with a local vendor that's going to bring in more local produce. And then also offering salad bars in the cafeteria markets more fresh produce, and that gives you a little bit more leeway to bring in more product. And I think that's it. If anybody has any other questions, we can do this at that time.
Thanks, Dan. So this is Deb again. Dan, thank you very much for your overview of what's going on in New Jersey, which I know is especially relevant to a lot of folks who've joined us this afternoon, as I know they are from New Jersey. We got a number of questions, and I'd just like to start. Dan, there was one specific question for you, but I'd love for Andrea to answer it as well. What are the most successful or popular produce items that you've served to your kids during the course of buying local for your cafeteria?
I can go ahead on that first, Andrea.
Go ahead.
One good one that we do use, and I mentioned zucchini earlier. We have one food service director that actually took the zucchini. Since you don't have it, it's a summer crop here in New Jersey, and we have that growing. And at the beginning of the school year in September is really when your zucchini is finally coming in and it's almost done. We say the person took that zucchini, shredded it up in a Cuisinart, and actually put it in food storage bags, laid it out on sheet pans and froze it, and then throughout the winter was making a zucchini bread, whole grain obviously, that was that they were using throughout the winter, and it was still utilizing the local produce. So that's one little thing that we actually use.
Great. Yeah, so for us, probably our number one is apples. You know, Virginia is a huge apple producing state, and so we are able to we buy from a local orchard at the beginning of the school year, kind of into late fall. and then as they run out, we transition in with the distributor, who will usually still have some. They ran out a little bit earlier this year, and then we go to Washington State. But that's definitely our most popular items. Kids love to eat apples. Some other things at the beginning of the year, we buy a lot of watermelon and cantaloupe. There's a ton of that from this area. Kids like both of those. They've really learned to like the lettuce. It took a little bit. In the beginning, we would mix some of the local with what we had typically been serving, which was like a pre-chopped romaine. We had transitioned everybody from iceberg kind of years ago, but the Bibb lettuce was something new, and so we were mixing Bibb and some of the romaine that we were bringing in through the distributor. And then as the guidelines changed and we knew Bibb doesn't count as dark green, go figure. So we worked with our farmer to give him enough notice to say, we're probably going to still order some Bibb, but we're going to order more romaine because it counts as that dark green subgroup. And so but again, the kids have really learned. We use tons of that lettuce. Cucumbers and peppers in the beginning of the year go really well. At the very end of the school year, we have a real short window of opportunity for strawberries. Can usually serve them once or twice right at the end in May. Last year, there was a year when it didn't work out. They just weren't ready. But that's a real popular item. They're so good, and it's like a once or twice kind of thing at the end of the year. So yeah, those are some of the items that have been successful for us.
Great. Another question for, this was directed to Andrea, but again, I think it'd be fine for either of you to answer because it's a great question. Have either of you been able to take students to visit any of the farms that have supplied your cafeterias? And, has it been you asking the growers to set up field trips, or have your farmers offered to you to have your kids come visit?
Yeah. So I guess, Dan, I'll go first on this one. Is that good? Or,
that's fine.
Okay. So yeah, we have not done a lot of farm field trips. We've done some. I think our field trips have been more to pumpkin patches and things like that. So, where kids are learning about how food grows and they go out to the pumpkin patch, but we didn't necessarily buy, from that particular farmer. We have had Farmer Marlin, who grows our lettuce, come into schools, and so he does like a little demo with, he grows in greenhouses, hydroponic lettuce, and so he shows them how he puts the seed in the little kind of foam thing, and then he brings in the flat where he puts the seedlings into, and he'll show them some pictures. So he wasn't as comfortable with kids coming out to his farm, so we kind of brought him to the kids. This year we're going to have a summer enrichment program focusing on local foods, and we're going to do some farm tours with that, and we're going to go to the farmers market where the kids will be able to meet some of these farmers, and also out to the produce auction so they can see how that works. Again, it's a small group of kids, but I think for us, we focused on procurement first, and now we're really trying to move into more education, beyond what we're teaching kids in the cafeteria line about, this came from this particular farm, or this was grown in Virginia. We want to definitely be expanding our educational efforts at this point. So.
Now, we did not also have a lot of field trips going to the farms. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if that was because of legality reasons, but what we did have, if we had a tasting, one of our vendors would actually come out, and this was a person that is very, very passionate about getting local produce and other produce into the schools that kids have not ever seen or ever tasted. So most of these were during the lunch periods, and we would let the administration know that this is going to happen. And during that time, the person would come in, we would have a tasting. They would pick up the tasting while they came and got their lunch for the day. And then if anybody was bringing lunch from home, we'd have other tasting little portions available. And then what he would do is he would explain where it comes from, how it's grown, where this actual came from, this vegetable came from, and basically just gave them more so of an education about that product, which, as all of us know, we don't have that time to do that while we're trying to serve 100, 200, 300 students lunch. So this was actually good. He took about maybe 5 to 10 minutes towards the end. He tried not to interrupt snack time after that, but he did go ahead and give them an education that was brought to the students and brought to school. It didn't take them out of their educational time of class, which the administration really liked. So that's always an option that you can do also.
Great, thank you. Another question that has come up, actually, I'm going to back up and go with a comment that was submitted, which is very relevant to both produce and to beef. And one of the folks who's on the webinar with us just wanted to comment on the fact that when we think about geographic preference and we talk about utilizing product and preferring product from a local farmer versus a local processor is an important part of the equation, because processors are often located rather far away from the agricultural product. In particular, we know that happens a lot with meat. So I don't know if either of you have dealt with this. Andrea, I don't know if the processor that works with your beef farm, if that's an issue or not, but I don't know if you can speak to that briefly.
Sure. Yeah. We were actually looking for the product to be, both raised and processed within 100 miles. So we sort of put the geographic preference, for both. So yeah, and in our case they were. So we buy it from a farmer who also processes, and so they have really just have a great market in that they raise the animals. They have a retail store where they are able to sell sort of the higher end cuts. And then they were looking for a market for the ground beef, so it really worked out perfectly for them to sell those wholesale to us. And so I think that's what allowed them to win that bid. But to answer the question, we were really looking at wanting to, give preference to a farmer/producer that was close to us, to keep the money kind of closer to home. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you, Andrea.
Okay.
I appreciate that. Another question that someone had, and this one comes up a lot, is as a private citizen, how can you reach out to a school to encourage them to do some local purchasing and implement a farm to school program? Who's the best person to contact?
Dan, do you want to maybe answer that to be more specific to Jersey?
In one instance, to go ahead and get local produce in, and also to start by having the school garden in a kind of in a way to kind of partner with that. We started with the school board actually, and we knew somebody that was actually on the school board, so we had a little informal meeting with that person also, and they brought it up just in an informal meeting with the school board, and they said, they want a school garden and this and that, and they want to bring local produce in, and everybody said, well, why not? I mean, it's a win-win situation. So they went ahead and started it by informal, and then they brought it up to the school board. The actual food service director went in and talked to the school board, and that's how they got the local produce in, and it got good press. And then by the same thing, there was a couple construction companies that came out and said, we have extra materials, we'll help you with the garden, and that started that whole kind of one big circle, how everybody helped each other, and we were able to get the local produce in. Now, if you're talking about procuring the local produce, I would just go with your vendors like I mentioned before.
Thanks, Dan. This is Deb, and I know I'm only really supposed to be moderating questions, but I can't help but jump in on this one. And, as a private citizen, and there are a lot of them who are interested, in helping to facilitate farm to school and to nudge folks along, as parents or community members, you can always reach out to a local organization that helps facilitate this work. And of course, you've got great organizations like the New Jersey Farm to School Network which serves as the state lead for the National Farm to School Network and is a great resource in helping people get connected. And I also just wanted to add that in my own experience, oftentimes it's just great to start, you know, a really positively focused conversation with your food service director as well. So school boards are one way to go, or you can go straight to the source if that's a relationship you feel like you can build and you have a place to start with that.
Yeah.
To add to that, I definitely agree. You know, if I was not in this business and I wanted to get local produce in, everybody usually has a contact information on a menu or something to contact the food service director. And just for a private citizen or a parent to just call up and say, do you use any local produce? That might even put a buzz in the food service director's head.
Right. I would agree, and that's what I was going to add as well. And I think, you know, as parents and interested citizens, you know, it's also important, you know, to have those conversations with the food service director, just to wrap your mind around how the whole process works. I mean, clearly you don't have to have a full understanding, but I think, you know, in conversations that I've had with parents, you know, a lot don't understand that it is a business within a school and that we do have a pretty tight budget. And so, you know, we have to think about what kids will eat and, you know, within the context of can we afford it. And so, you know, it's been great. I've had such positive conversations with parents who have become huge advocates for our program. You know, when we start to talk about, you know, we have this much per meal to spend on food, and so, you know, we can do this, but this might not be as feasible. And so definitely I think it's great if parents can touch base with the food service director, because there may be things going on that you just don't know. I mean, we as school nutrition people aren't always great marketers because we're so bogged down with the day-to-day stuff that a lot of times things are going on that you might not even realize.
Great. Thank you both. The next question, which I'm sure is also burning for many people, is sort of the best place to find effective procurement policies or any key points that you would hit when you want to craft a bid or RFP. Obviously, people like Andrea and Dan are resources to you, and everyone will get their contact information to learn more about how they put together their language, and of course, some of that is in the slides. I also wanted to add, of course, that USDA right now is hosting a fabulous series of webinars about local food procurement, and I encourage you to check out their website, and the farmtoschool.org website for the National Farm to School Network is another good resource. But again, I'll turn this over to Andrea. And Dan, where would you direct a food service director who is interested in putting together a bid or RFP?
Great. Well, I think if they have not checked out some of those procurement webinars, as you mentioned, they are wonderful. I think we're, 3 or 4 in. There's one going on right now, I think. And I know those are going to be on the USDA Farm to School website. Is that right, Deb?
Yes, they are. They're available shortly after, like the next day or something like that.
Right. Okay. And, you know, also, I think within your district, typically there's a person who handles procurement issues and would know, you know, more about local procurement rules. And you know, again, there's a federal small purchase threshold, there's a state, and then typically there's you know, a local threshold as well. And so you always have to go with what's the most restrictive. And so I always kind of hesitate to put my examples out there because they might not be the same as, you know, what applies in your individual division. You always need to go with whatever is the most conservative. So I think talking to anybody who specializes in procurement, some divisions are so small that, you know, there's not that procurement specialist, but there's usually somebody who handles, you know, the POs and the buying and would be able to answer some of those questions.
Perfect, thanks. We had another question about whether or not, Dan and Andrea, you have worked at all with any school food service unions around farm to school. I know that there's been some of that here in Philadelphia, but I'd love to know if that's something that's come up with you all.
That has not come up for us to this point now.
Okay.
We have not either.
Okay. And then there was also a question just about, you know, Dan, you started to address this, but someone else was wondering about sort of, you know, how you would link what's happening in the cafeteria to educational efforts like a garden or things that might be happening in the classroom. So if you could maybe elaborate a little bit around how you reach parents and the larger school community, that would be fantastic.
In one instance, what we did was we partnered with the gym teacher who was actually teaching health, and it was more so of a this is what I'm trying. I think it was a fourth or fifth grade gym teacher, and what that person was doing in the health class was talking about balanced meals and all that, and that you need to get more fruits and vegetables in. So we partnered with them to come in, and they said, well, can we put in some local produce here into this? So we were bringing the health classes some other items to actually taste while they were in class. So partnering with them, besides your vendor, like we brought our vendor in to speak, was one other item, but partnering with your health teacher. The other idea that we had was we had one school district was having a wellness day, and they have a wellness day every year, and in that wellness it was a wellness week, and in one day it was a wellness day, and everybody had to wear red, and it was something that was going on. So what we did, we partnered with the school, and everything on the menu was red. So we brought in apples that were local. We brought tomatoes in that were local, and everything we served for that wellness lunch was red. And the kids got a little, if they came in and they bought the red meal for Wellness Day, we gave them a token, and they were able to put it in as like a 50-50 raffle. And we raffled something off, and that was actually put together by the school district. So that was even a little bit more to get them to eat more local produce and to have them experience something like that.
Wonderful. Well, we just have a few minutes left, so I just wanted to mention a couple of things. A few attendees have asked about where to find information about the USDA Farm to School Procurement Webinar Series. And you can just go to the USDA Farm to School website. You can just Google USDA Farm to School, and it'll be the first thing you hit. The series itself have been running on Thursday afternoons, I think at 2 o'clock. I had to miss today's to be with all of you today, but be sure to check that out. I also wanted to mention that there will be a series of more targeted Mid-Atlantic procurement webinar series happening. Tegan Hagee is the new representative for USDA Farm to School for our region, and she's located in central New Jersey and just messaged me that that would be happening. So that will really be relevant to everyone. So stay tuned for that. And if you're not signed up for the USDA Farm to School e-newsletter as of yet, I highly recommend that. Those come out about once a week, and sometimes there are other special announcements just to keep everyone on their toes about upcoming events or a webinar or grant announcements and things of that nature. The last thing I wanted to mention for everyone on the call, especially for those of you who are here from New Jersey, is that the New Jersey Farm to School website is a really, New Jersey Farm to School Network rather, is a great website for you. It's njfarmtoschool.org. There's lots of information about local produce procurement, and has even a list of sort of vendors, distributors, aggregators, and others who we know are working with schools across the state. So that's an easy place to start to reach out to some new vendors if you're interested in doing so. Other folks who are from other places in the region, you're always welcome to contact people like me or your own state representative for the National Farm to School Network, and they should be able to guide you. I think that was about it. Let me just check for any more questions. There's no more questions. So I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up. I would really like to thank Chelsea Simpson from the National Farm to School Network for putting all of the technology together for this. We really appreciate it. It's a great opportunity to bring us all together. I also, of course, want to thank Andrea Early and Dan Wachowski for taking the time out of their busy days as food service directors to come to us to talk about the work that they do and the easy and sometimes not so easy but totally worth it ways that they bring local food into their cafeterias. Thank you both. I'd also like to thank Beth and Sherry from the New Jersey Farm to School Network, who gave us the seed of the idea for this webinar, and we appreciate them very much for bringing all the farm to school to the Garden State. And the last thing I want to mention is that it is not too late to sign up for the National Farm to Cafeteria Conference. I highly encourage folks to attend if you're able to. It's taking place in mid-April. You can go to farmtocafeteriaconference.org, take a look. Early bird registration ends on March 4th, which I believe is Tuesday. It's a wonderful place to network, learn a whole lot more about practicing farm to school on the ground, and to just get inspired and ready to get down to farm to school business in your school and in your community. If we could just flip to the contact slide real quick. Great. So again, these slides will be available to you in slide format and also as an audio recording. I was mistaken, there won't be a transcript, but there will be an audio recording. And this is contact information for the 4 of us that you heard from today, and we encourage you to reach out if you have any questions, and we thank you for joining us. Have a great afternoon.